one that we haven't sang since I was like 16. We're going to sing another one we haven't sang since I was like 12. And then we're going to sing one that we learned like last week. So this is going to be really fun. We're going to start with God of Wonders. Lord of all creation, of water, earth, and sky, the heavens are your tabernacle. Glory to the Lord on high. God of wonders beyond our galaxy, you are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy. Lord of heaven and earth, Lord of heaven and earth, Lord of heaven and earth, Lord of heaven and earth. Early in the morning, I will celebrate the night. When I stumble in the darkness, I will cry your name by night. God of wonders beyond our galaxy, you are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy. Lord of heaven and earth, Lord of heaven and earth, Lord of heaven and earth, Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. Hallelujah to the Lord of heaven and earth. God of wonders beyond our galaxy, you are holy, holy. The universe declares your majesty. You are holy, holy. Lord of heaven and earth. Who wrote that? That was written by Mark Bird and Steve Hindelong in 2000.
Wow, that's a old one.
It's very old. Now we're going to sing a little bit more new one
While.
by Brian Johnson and Jeremy Riddle. This is called You Are Good. I like that we're singing all these songs that are like praising God, and here I was complaining about my day about 10 minutes ago. And so it's a good reminder to always sing these songs so it puts you back in perspective. Okay, we're going to try this one. It's a newbie. I want to scream it out from every mountain top. Your goodness knows no bounds. Your goodness never stops. Your mercy follows me. Your kindness called Not Beyond You that Mom wrote. And it has been a while since we've sang this.
It's a really long time, so.
But
I
it's,
sit down, I have to sit down for this one, so get this out of the way.
it's,
not-
it's deep,
it's that
so listen
deep.
to the words.
Yeah, I gotta get this out of my way. Maybe not. It's kind of tangled up. Oh.
We usually have
Maybe
my
not.
cute brother back here playing a solo, so
Yeah.
pretend you hear a
I
solo.
really needed him on that last one too, but.
That's fine.
All right, this song is called Not Beyond You, and it is it's a deep song. Innocence of a well, evil man prosper, and there is no end to the heartache and lies. The blood of the helpless on hands of the ruthless, and it all seems hidden, but not from your eyes. 'Cause this is so beyond me, but it's not beyond you. There is nothing inside me that knows what to do. But your grace is sufficient, your love ever true. This is so beyond me, but it's not beyond you. Food for the hungry, on plates for the healthy, and someone between takes a cut of the bread. And some live in castles, while some live in shanties, and some have no place to lay down their heads. This is so beyond me, but it's not beyond you. There is nothing inside me that knows what to do. But your grace is sufficient, your love's ever true. This is so beyond me, but it's not beyond you. Some climb the ladder on the backs of another, and never turn to see the damage they've done. And sometimes the winner is really a loser, and God only knows all the methods they've spun. 'Cause this is so beyond me, but it's not beyond you. There is nothing inside me that knows what to do. But your grace is sufficient, your love ever true. This is so beyond me, but it's not beyond you. Do everything your eyes see through. Only you know what to do. 'Cause it's not beyond you.
Last week, we were talking about Saul, and just wanted to let you know that I'm doing a lot of praying this week, and this lesson seems really interesting and apropos, as the rest of them have been, but this one even more so because I titled this one, David's Awkward Ascent to the Throne. And so I would say that in our lives, we're going through COVID, it's awkward. Everything's awkward, everything's off. People don't know how to act, what to do, where to go, and when they go, where they sit, where do they talk, do they wear a mask, do they not wear a mask? So I would say we are in an awkward stage. And I think that a lot of people are kind of in that stuck place where like, not sure what to do. But the one thing we know that we can do is we trust in God. because God has promised that he will take care of us. He has promised that. But sometimes he lets us go for long periods of time in awkward places so that we trust him. And so David had to do that. So if you remember, Samuel had anointed David like 10 years ago, okay? And said, you're going to be king. But in the meantime, David is living in the forest with his, basically like with his merry men, hiding out from Saul, who keeps trying to kill him. And Saul keeps promising that he won't. David tried multiple times to kill him, but he doesn't. And so he eventually flees to Philistine land and lives there. And then last time we talked about Saul's terribly tragic death. And I wanted to add something to that. So I was doing some work in this to prepare for this lesson, and this Perkheiser, exploring the Old Testament, had some things to say about Saul's death. And he said, last week we talked about the witch of Endor, and how she had told him that she saw Samuel, and he said all this stuff. And this guy, this theologian, said that totally, just visiting the witch, took him off track and probably resulted in his death because he was distracted by the witch. So, thank you. Thank you. So this guy is thinking, and because he talked to a witch and an evil spirit rather than God, he sort of had a self-fulfilling prophecy rather than actually hearing from God, and he was distracted, and it resulted in his death. Okay, so we didn't have.
I unmuted you.
Oh, could you not hear any of that? Okay, so we're better. Okay, so anyway, I'll hold this down now for a little one. So anyway, all of that resulted in Saul's tragic death. And so now David is over in the camp, and he is going to, he gets this guy to come visit him. And this guy comes and tells him Saul is dead. And the guy's groveling, and he's saluting him, and he hands him a crown and an armband from Saul. And David says, tell me what happened. And the guy says, well, I saw that Saul had been wounded, and the 3 sons of Saul were dead. And so I went over there, and he yelled for me to kill him. And so I did. So we know that's not what happened, because the Bible tells us, and I don't know who saw it, but somebody, an Israelite, recorded that Saul asked his armor bearer to kill him, and his armor bearer refused because he was the anointed son of God, or the anointed king of God, not the son of God, the anointed king. And so Saul fell on his own sword, so he killed himself. And again, probably because he was taking the wrong counsel and evil, and maybe God was even giving him a chance. Maybe he wasn't even going to die in this battle, but he did, because he killed himself. And then his armor bearer, having been in shame and disgrace, and I did talk about how the Philistines had a terrible habit of torturing, and remember they cut out Samson's eyes, and they would torture people and make fun of them and use them for their own just sickness. In fact, it said the Chronicles, which also kind of mimics everything written in the 2nd book of Samuel. So if you read through Samuel, a lot of the Chronicles talks about the exact same things, only whoever what the chronicler was, they wrote some different details. Like the chronicler said, the person who wrote Chronicles says that they cut off Saul's head and took it to the temple of Dagon as a way of saying, our God has defeated your God. And we know that's not what happened. Saul was defeated because he disobeyed the God, not because Dagon was more powerful. But they did that. And as you recall, the mighty warriors went and got the bodies of Saul and his sons, and they took them and buried them and did mourning and fasting. And so when David hears this, and the men that were with David hear him, they go into mourning. They tear their clothes and they put things on their head. There was a practice among the Jews, and we've talked about this, of tearing your clothes and putting dirt on your head and just going in they call it sackcloth and ashes. And they go into mourning, and the Israelite people were very open about their mourning. They weren't ashamed of it. They were very open about their mourning. And so, but then David says, he looks at this guy and he says,
so tell me who you are. And he said, I'm an Amalekite. And those are the people, those are the opportunists that always sneak around and get the women and children when the warriors are gone. These are the opportunists. These ones they have been the plague to the Israelites since Moses. And they will never strike at the warriors. They're cowards. They only strike when there's only women and children. And these are the same people who stole David's wives and children, and David had to go get them. Same people. So this guy is making himself off like he's working for the Israelites, and he's just an opportunist. He's lying all the way through. So David says, he gets one of his young warriors and said, kill this guy, because he's like a liar. And he said, you're dying because you admitted that you killed the king of Israel. And so you're gonna die. But I don't know that David knew that he didn't really, he was just a liar, but David knew he was an opportunist trying to gain in the court. And what really is interesting about this whole story is that this guy had to have seen everything that happened. Possibly could have even saved Saul, possibly could have come to his aid. He had to have seen everything, because no Philistine is gonna leave the crown and the armband of the king. They would never have left it. That would have been in their crown, jewel, possessions at the foot of Dagon. They would have never left that. So this guy had to have been coming along just in the middle of battle, and he takes the crown and the armband of the dead king before the Philistines even get there. So one thing we're learning about this story is that beware of opportunists, because there are people that do everything they do for their own gain. And they don't care who they hurt, who they lie to, whatever, they'll do anything for their own gain. And that's just like this person. But we know he's lying, because the Bible definitely says that Saul fell on his own sword. And there's probably a lot of evidence for that. There had to have been other witnesses, people who are probably standing around going, no, Saul, don't do it, because the armor bearer was telling them not to. But he did. And so in devastation, David writes this very interesting thing. And David even says, he admits that he killed the king instead of saving him. So David had him killed. And then David is in mourning, and he writes like a little psalm in the middle of this passage in Samuel. And now we are in 2 Samuel. So in 2 Samuel, we're looking at David ascending to the throne of Israel. So we're looking at 2 Samuel, and here's what he writes. He writes this whole song. Because remember, David's a musician and he's a writer. He writes this whole song about Saul, and especially about Jonathan, because Jonathan was his deeply loved friend. And he says, how I weep for my brother Jonathan, how much I loved you. And your love for me was deep and deeper than the love of a woman. Oh, how mighty the heroes have fallen. So there's some interesting things that he's saying here that give a little bit of information about their friendship, and give a little information about David himself and his own weaknesses. And one of the things we learn is that this incredible bond between Jonathan and David is an unending, unstopped. There's nothing that stops it, and they vow to take care of each other's families. We know that it's non-sexual, just a devout friendship, and because of his comparison to the relationship with a woman. And then we also know something about David, and we see his weakness here. David has never had a real friendship bond with any of his wives. You can tell that by this passage. And the reason that he's had no real friendship bonds is because he doesn't know the type of friendship that you have of somebody that's intimately knows you, like Jonathan knew him. And so you can see that David sees women as a little bit more like a possession or something to make you great and give you descendants. So, and he's kind of following the world that way, because remember last time he took another wife besides Abigail. She's the prophetess, she's wise, she's beautiful. He didn't need another wife, but he took another wife. And in this time that we're talking about here, these 7.5 years, he takes like 7 more wives. He takes a total of, I think, 7 or 8 wives, between also with the other 2. And so each one of them has a son. And one of them ends up a rapist, which I've mentioned. The other ends up killing the other one, and rightfully so. Another one ends up rising up against him. And all these things happen to his sons because he wasn't a father to them. And often he couldn't be a father to them because he had too many households. So he's brought this on himself. And so it's really sad when you see this because he obviously didn't have a real friendship with any of these wives. And how can you have a real friendship if somebody's going to just get another wife? So none of these women really trusted him either, obviously, and rightfully so. So we learn that about David, and that comes out in a later story when David really has his fall. But we see a little chink in his armor right here with the fact that he's collecting over these 7.5 years. He's collecting wives, and you know, David sought the Lord in everything related to battle and every big decision, but he never sought the Lord when it came to his family. He never did, and you can see by his decisions. So when it comes to battle and ruling, he does amazing things because he's always seeking God. He's always going to the priest, and they're always praying. But over these things with his family, he's not seeking God, and you can see. So we also see that he, in his life, if you look at his life, no one in his life was as trustworthy as Jonathan. And when you look at him, you look at his generals, the people around him, no one ever was as trustworthy to him as this Jonathan, who he lost. So it's interesting to me that he was deeply grieved, and rightfully so, and he never broke his oath to Jonathan, which we'll learn later about Jonathan's descendants. He never broke his promise to protect Jonathan's descendants. So he is now the king of that area. He's like, time to go back home. He goes into the land of Judah, which is in Hebron, and he joins with the people of Judah. And they say, yes, we want you to be our king. But they're not united yet. All of the rest of the Israelites are with the son of Saul, and his name is Ishbosheth. Some of these names are great. Ishbosheth, okay? Ishbosheth was Saul's son. And Ishbosheth has Abner. And Abner is really important because Abner is the general that Saul had. And Abner is one of the mighty warriors. He's amazing. He is the general that Saul had. And Abner has a very deep respect for David. And so that's important to remember. In the meantime, while David was busy accumulating women and trying to hide from Saul, God gave David some amazing things. He gave him the mighty warriors. And David accumulated some amazing mighty warriors. And they're renowned for the things they did. Like there was these warriors called the Three. And they were just called the Three. And they had names, but they did things like one of them killed with his spear 800 warriors. One of them killed 300 warriors in one battle. And they were called the Three, and they were famous. And one time when he was hanging out with the Three, they didn't have any water or any food, and David happened to say in front of the Three, "Oh, I am so thirsty. I just wish someone would give me a drink of water." So the Three famous warriors climbed into the Philistine camp and came back with a scoop of water. And David was amazed that they had done it, and he poured it out on the ground to say, "I never want one of my men to die because I asked for water," you know? So he wouldn't drink it because he didn't want his men to die to get him water. So he had some amazing guys that were really, really pretty cool, and they had gathered this little army. So at one point, Joab, his general is called Joab, and Joab has two brothers. One is named Asahel, and one is named Abishai, and they're both amazing. Asahel is supposed to be as fast as a gazelle, and Abishai is just this big, mighty warrior. He had another warrior that supposedly, with a club, took down a 7.5-foot Egyptian, took his sword away from, or took his spear away from him, and killed him in battle. So he had all these amazing men. So what David didn't realize is God was watching out for him. He had like the most amazing bodyguard around, and he just didn't even realize it. So anyway, while they're out, Joab, David's men, come across Abner and some of the men of Saul. And they decide, and it doesn't say, the Bible doesn't say why people do this. I wish it did. Don't you wish the Bible gave more details? I just wish it. But they each decided, Joab and Abner decided they're going to have their 12 guys. They're going to have like a little mini Coliseum event. And let's say, let's have my 12 guys fight your best 12 guys, and we'll see what happens. And there was so much animosity between the two groups that all 24 guys were killed in just a short period of time. All 24 guys were killed. So it didn't solve anything, because they were going to agree to, kind of like the Goliath thing, we'll submit to you if your guys beat us, but we don't have to kill everyone that way. So they had this war, and everyone died. So David's men kind of had the upper hand, and they started pursuing Saul's men. And this Asahel, this fast guy, decides within himself, and for pride I'm sure, decides he's going to get Abner, the general. And he is fast. This guy is so fast, he can just outrun anyone. So he's chasing Abner, and Abner is yelling back at him, hey, why don't you go get one of the young men and take their armor and take it back and have pride. He knows he's after glory. He tells him, go get their armor, go get your glory on a young man. He's like, I don't want to kill you because you're Joab's brother. I don't want to kill you. And he tells him, he begs him, don't come after me. I don't want to kill you. But that guy won't let up, and you know it's a pride thing. Comes all the way up behind him, and Abner kills him with the back end of his spear. And he's just in self-defense. The guy's chasing him, he warned him, and so Asahel is dead, which is sad. And when it gets back to Joab, it's just this amazing mess, a sad mess where now Joab is angry. Joab is angry. In the meantime, some weird things are happening over in the Israelite camp. Ishbosheth is jealous of Abner's power. And Ishbosheth actually accuses Abner of sleeping with one of the king's concubines. I mean, the king's dead, and there's all these women. I always thought how sad that was, because then there's all these women, they have no family, they're just kind of there. But if you took possession of one of them, it was like you're saying, I'm going to be king now. So I don't know if it really happened or if he just got accused of it. But when Ishbosheth accused his general and telling him, you're trying to get the throne, and that's why you slept with that girl, Abner knows, I gotta leave. He's like, I'm going to go submit to David. I'm going to go show up, and I'm going to be David's I'm going to go work for David, because this thing is going down. And so he goes over to David and he says, I want to work for you. I'm changing sides. What do you want me to do? And David is honored because Abner is an amazing general. And he's like, yeah, okay. This is what I want you to do, Abner, to show you're loyal to me. I want you to go over and get Michal, my other wife. Now remember, Saul had given one of his daughters, Michal, to David as a wife. But then when he got mad at David, he gave her to somebody else. Now, I don't know why David is asking this. To me, it's just dumb. But again, David is not use his brain when it comes to women and family and those kind of things. He thinks in his mind that it'll make me look better if I have Saul's daughter in my court, because then I'm uniting the great Saul, and we can, our children will be like royalty. I think that's probably what he's thinking, but he's just not thinking. So Abner says, well, she's been given to somebody else, David. He's like, I don't care. If you want to serve me, you're going to go get her. So Abner's this big general. He's got a bunch of guys that go with him everywhere. They go get Michal. And this is the weirdest thing. The guy that she's taken from is so sad. He's just brokenhearted. It doesn't say anything about how Michal felt. I'm sure she wasn't happy. I don't know. But just to be thrown around like a piece of meat, this woman, well, you're his, you're not his, you're whatever. I'm sure she wasn't happy. But it said that Abner goes and gets her, and takes her away, and that her husband is following her and crying after her, and just he's just shocked. And finally Abner's like, all right, dude, go away, I'm gonna have to kill you. Okay? Just go home. Okay, there's nothing I can do about this. Go home. And so he finally does. And so so Abner brings him Michael, and everything's fine. And then Joab and some of the other mighty men had been gone at the time. And so when Joab gets back, and Joab is supposed to be his #1 guy. He's the general of his army. When Joab gets back, he's like, what? Abner was here? You let Abner? He's like mad. Abner killed my brother. And so Joab, unbeknownst to David, sneaks over with his other big mighty warrior brother, Abishai, and they kill Abner. They kill him in cold blood. And there were 2 of them, so he didn't have a chance. They got Abner. And when the word gets back to David, he mourns for Abner, and he is so angry. This is Joab. He's supposed to be able to trust Joab. He curses Joab, and he forces him to go through mourning. So they give this big funeral for Abner, and he forces all of his men to give honor to Abner, including Joab. He's like, you do it, because you were in the wrong. And the curse will come on you because you did this. And you'll see later that Joab is not totally trustworthy. It's kind of sad. So Jonathan is not there now, and Joab is not totally trustworthy. And we're going to see that even more. It seems like he is, but then every once in a while he'll just go off and do what he wants, and this is a perfect example of what he did. So then in the meantime, Ishbosheth is assassinated. So this is how, we're talking about people opportunists. When people get word that David's around and Abner's dead, they're like, we gotta get rid of Ishbosheth because David's coming. He's gonna kill us. So 2 regular guys, just part of his army, just sneak up like farmers, and they go disguise it, and they kill Ishbosheth, which David would have never done. He would have never done that. And so they kill him, and then people start killing the relatives of Saul. And they start killing the kids of Jonathan, because they're Saul's grandchildren. And they start killing everybody, thinking that's what David's going to do when he shows up. And that's not what David was going to do. And in the meantime, something interesting happens. Everyone's getting slaughtered, but this nurse who's taking care of one of the little sons of Jonathan, she picks him up, and she runs away. And she accidentally drops him in the flight. She's saving his life, and she did save his life, but he was crippled because of being dropped. And his name is Mephibosheth. And he got away, but he's this one crippled person that escapes all the carnage of people changing sides, opportunists, people looking for, I just want to be on the side of who's going to win. And that's the way a lot of these people were. And it's really sad because we need to stand with our ethics and right and wrong and what God says, not with whoever's going to be in charge, And I see that a lot of that happening in our country right now. People are just going to go whichever way the wind blows, And we really need to stand up for what's right. And there's that saying, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right? And that's so true. And that's why the Bible is so important about teaching us so many things. Even the bad, ugly stories have something to teach us. And in this story, we can see how some people just use opportunity. And that's why I wanted to sing Not Beyond You, because sometimes it seems like evil prospers. And sometimes for a while, it does. But in the end, God sees it all. And there's nothing that's hidden from his eyes. And in the end, God makes everything right. So even the people changing sides and opportunists, in the end, it's all going to come out. It's all the truth will be known. And everything will come out. But the hard part is, like David, sometimes you have to wait 10 years. I mean, that's how long David waited. Sometimes there's this huge, long waiting period. And during that waiting period, you just have to trust God and keep doing it. and we have to make sure we're on the right side. But to make sure we're on God's side. Because I think, like I said, sometimes people will just go whichever way the wind blows, you know? And I think Hollywood has a lot of control over people and just saying, well, this is right, and this is okay, and this is not okay, and people are just kind of going along. And you know what? All of those people will answer to God someday. Because to whomever is given much, much is expected. So if people have a big presence where people listen to them, God will hold them accountable for everyone who listens to them. And so we have to really be careful that we're on the right side, on God's side. And the Word tells us so many things, you know. I mean, I was talking to some kids in my youth group about getting used by people, not knowing when you're with people that are just going with the wind or if they're your real friends. And my kids in youth group were like, yeah, I've had friends who just totally use you. That's all they do. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But friends that come from God aren't like that. And God will never do that. You can always trust God. And you can trust the people that come from God. And even though people aren't perfect, the ones who are really trying to serve God are the ones you can trust, right? And so, so we have some lessons to learn in this. And because of Iphishoph's death, David eventually rises to the throne. But here's some things that we have to learn. First of all, seek God in everything. Not just the big stuff. You know, we might pray to God about our job, or pray to God about, well, make sure that we have enough money to pay for everything. But sometimes we forget, look at David, he forgot to ask God about his family. And he really messed up, really bad. And we'll see it more later. But seek God in everything. I mean, God really wants to give us direction and wisdom. And I think some people are like, well, I want God to have this part of my life, but I don't want God to have this part of my life. And that part that you don't give to God will just come back and get you. It will come back and haunt you. And it will mess you up. So just give it over to God and quit fighting around with it. Just submit to God. Because He's got your back. And you can trust Him. The other thing that we can learn from this story is beware of opportunists, you know. If you hang around for a while, truth always comes out and you can see who your real friends are, you know. Sometimes it takes a little while to see who your real friends are or who your enemies are sometimes, which is sad. But in a way, when you discover a real friend, then God's really given you something, you know, it's kind of cool. So the other thing is to trust God and be patient, because even though it seems like evil will prosper, it seems like sometimes evil's winning the game. In the end, all will be made right. But sometimes God lets us go through really long periods of, are you going to really trust me? And I feel like that's that awkward time, going back to the awkward thing. We're in that awkward time. It's like, wow, I don't even know what to do right here. You know, some people are without a job, they don't know where to go, and if they go to a job, which job should they get? And what if they get COVID when they go to that job, and what about their kids? And I mean, people are in an awkward time. And now's the time to trust God. And so, and the other lesson, which I talked to my teens about this, is avoid impulsiveness. I mean, if you think about, in this story, the stupid things that people do just on impulse, you know, like Joab, I'm going to kill that guy. That came back to haunt him later, which we will see. And God did not let him off for that, because He wasn't sorry. And so when we act on impulse, without thinking, without praying, that's when we get into trouble, you know. And God is not putting us in this maze that we'll just trying to figure it out. Try to figure me out, people, you know. Figure it out. I'll just watch you while you struggle. No, God is not trying to do that. But He does want us to trust Him. And He does want us to ask for direction. And He does want us to just know that He's going to come through. And so that's what we learn. Don't do anything on impulse. Impulse just gets people into trouble. And I've always told all my students, one of the signs of emotional intelligence, which is proven even by secular sociologists and psychologists, is, can you control your impulses? And it's a major one. And they're finding out like all these criminals, that's the one of them, the big ones that they don't have is the control of impulse. So if we can teach ourselves and our kids to control impulses, everybody has impulses. And that's why the Bible says, in your anger, do not sin. It doesn't say sinning is anger is sin. Because not everybody did. Even Jesus got angry. But he says, in your anger, do not sin. In other words, God knows that we're emotional beings, that we go through hard times, and he made us emotional. I mean, in a way, so that we can be angry over things that bad things that happen, righteous anger, that we can feel love, that we can feel joy, that we can feel disappointment when we see things get hurt, when people get hurt. He made us emotional people, but we have to be really careful that when we are in those emotional times, we don't impulsively act out in a way that we shouldn't. That's when we're feeling that way, that's when we fall to your knees, call a friend, call on God, and don't act on your impulses, right? And so I just want to end, I'm going to have Casey come up, we're going to sing a song called Let the Fire Fall, which is actually pretty appropriate because when God is setting us through things, you know, to refine gold, gold has to go through the fire to be purified. And so when we go through the fire, though, it's not a good time. I'm not having a good time moving this stand up my way. But it's, so when we go through the rough times, God is just making us into pure gold. And so, this is like a comedy act right here. Okay, when we're going through hard times, it's just God making us into something beautiful and getting rid of the garbage. You know, like maybe we have stuff in our past that we kind of let hang on, and God's like, no, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to help you with that. You're going to get past that. And so he makes us into gold by refining us. If I can ever get this on, Casey, are you ready to sing this? I don't know if I can do it now, but anyway, okay. Good?
Why does it feed back on that? I know, but it's plugged in and everything.
And this is falling on me. Okay, well, maybe we can't do it. Just got it. Let's try it. Go live. Test, 1, 2, test. Okay. You ready, Case? Can you hand me that pic right there, please?
for watching or being here.
Climb aboard this train, step out of your sin. Climb aboard this train, climb aboard this train, climb aboard this train, and step out of